I'm joined now by John Blaxland, Professor of International Security and Intelligence Studies at the Australian National University. John Blaxland, thank you for your time. How encouraging is the news the Trade Minister will meet his Chinese counterpart next week?
Oh, Karina, this is very positive news, and it's an incremental step that follows the announcements that we've seen from our Foreign Minister's engagement with Chinese counterpart and the Prime Minister's engagement with President Xi as well. So this is an appropriate and, calibrated next step in the right direction. But it comes, at a time when the authorities in Beijing are still pretty much adhering to the no limits friendship approach to engagement with Russia, even though they aren't overtly, directly involved in the conflict. We know they've been providing some moral support. And of course, there's ongoing concerns about the military situation, the approach that China's taken in the South China Sea, its use of armed militias, and its approach to our friends and neighbours in Southeast Asia, as well as security partners like Japan and others, who are relentlessly being pursued by China in and around the so-called Senkaku, or China calls them Diaoyu Islands. And of course, what's happening still relentlessly in and around Taiwan. The application of pressure that is deeply unsettling, let alone the unresolved issues of Australians in detention in China, as well as the issues of, broader issues about the domestic political issues inside China concerning Uyghurs, let alone Tibetans and others. So these are issues that won't go away despite these good intentions here. And it's very interesting to think about the relations heading in the right direction that President Xi wrote to our Governor-General, David Hurley, recently for Australia Day, commending the positives there, but not an outreach to our Prime Minister directly. So there's a bit of gamesmanship going on here. And of course, the other side to this is that Australian traders who, got their fingers burnt by being a little bit overexposed in the Chinese market have, of course, in the last few years diversified. And now there's a wariness about getting overly committed back into the Chinese market when they've actually succeeded pretty well with other markets.
So,
and
John
course,
Blaxland,
as we know,
what's in it for China then if these trade restrictions are dropped?
Well, clearly, they don't buy from us because they like a liberal Western democracy. They do so because it's a good deal. Essentially, Australian materials are the world's best. Our lobsters, our wine, let alone our coal and our iron ore. These are things that they don't buy because they like our political system. They do so because it's a good deal, and they have had to make compromises for them in terms of their own interests by going elsewhere, and they've demonstrably failed. The approach that was meant to punish Australia just hasn't had that effect. When they went to buy barley from somewhere else, well, the market that barley was going to has opened up for Australian barley, and Australian barley producers have diversified as well. So the effect that they were trying to generate has not been as significant. The benefits have not been accruing for China, and the costs that China has incurred on its own side are now outweighed by the benefits of re-engaging with Australia. So, and enough time has passed for China to be able to kind of rhetorically move on from the punishment phase. And of course, we've seen rhetorically they've moved on from the wolf warrior diplomacy and the exercise of sharp power as well. But I think it's important to remember that, actions speak louder than words. So let's see what China does now in terms of following through on the lifting of these $20 billion worth of restrictions. And hopefully that they do follow through, and that is something that is substantiated. Of course, that will then, lead to significant thawing beyond the rhetoric substantively between our two countries. And, I'm at the ANU. We're expecting an influx of Chinese students in the coming days. That's a positive sign as well. So there are significant indicators of improvement. There are opportunities now for both sides to take that to the next level, but both sides will still be pretty wary about what happens beyond that.
Yeah, you called the meeting a positive incremental step. So how likely is it that the meeting will see the trade restrictions dropped? Or do you think it would look forward to potentially a timeline for when those restrictions might be dropped?
So we've seen the talk of a timeline for some months now, and going back to APEC meetings and Bali summits last year. So I think we could well see some of them materialise in the next few days. That's certainly feasible. And then the key for China will be to not let this be something that sees them lose face. And it's important for us as we think about any kind of triumphal kind of dance we might want to generate as a result of, effectively winning over this. We don't necessarily want to rub this in anybody's face. It's not in our interests. It's certainly not in their interests for that to happen.
Professor John Blaxland, thank you so much for your time.
Good to be with you, Karina.